The smell of burned plastic still clings to my uniform. Some nights I swear I can taste the smoke on my tongue, even though it's been months since the fire. That's the thing about fire. You can put it out, but it never really leaves. I just finished a 14-hour shift when I saw her, Karen, the HOA president, standing on my front lawn with her clipboard, her lips curled like she smelled something rotten. She was pointing at the ramp I'd built for my daughter, Ava. Ava's skin still bore the scars from the house fire that nearly took her life. The ramp was for her wheelchair, the one she needed after the burns fused her knees. But Karen didn't see any of that. All she saw was a violation of neighborhood aesthetics. And when she laughed, when she mocked my daughter's scars in front of half the block, something in me went silent, not angry, just still, because she had no idea who she was talking to. No idea what we'd survived, and absolutely no idea that I was the fire chief who'd pulled my own child out of that blaze. Before everything burned, our street looked like something out of a magazine. Maple Ridge, a quiet suburban pocket in Northern California, where lawns were symmetrical, dogs wore sweaters, and the HOA newsletter felt more like a gossip column than a set of rules I used to laugh about it. I even helped shovel snow for the older neighbors during the rare cold spells. My wife, Lauren, baked cinnamon rolls every Saturday morning, the kind that filled the whole house with butter and sugar and warmth. Our daughter, Ava, would help her frost them, always managing to smear more icing on her cheeks than on the pastries. I was the fire chief of Station 47. 22 years on the job, I'd seen things most people couldn't stomach. Charred remains of homes, melted toys, the silence after tragedy. But at home, I was just Dad. The guy who built birdhouses on weekends and fell asleep in front of the TV with his boots still on. Ava was 8 when it happened. 8. She loved painting. Every wall in her room was covered with drawings, clouds, fire trucks, and, oddly enough, a lot of suns. She said the sun made her feel safe. Warm, but not hot. Like hugs, she used to say. That night, the alarm went off at 2:17 a.m. At first, I thought it was my pager. Another call, another house. But it wasn't. It was ours. Smoke rolled under the bedroom door before I could even grab my radio. The hall glowed orange. The smell was instant, thick, chemical, wrong. Lauren was already on her feet coughing, calling for Ava. I'll never forget that sound, her voice cracking in the dark. I found Ava's room engulfed, curtains gone, paint bubbling, the air alive with heat. I didn't think. I just moved. Training took over. I threw a blanket around myself and dove through the window shattered when the heat hit it, and the sound, it was like the world screaming. When I carried her out, she wasn't crying. That was the worst part. The silence. Her small body trembling, her face streaked with ash and tears. The doctors said she was lucky. 2nd and 3rd degree burns across her legs, a portion of her back, weeks in the burn unit, months of therapy. We rebuilt, or at least we tried to. The house was reconstructed with insurance and donations from the firehouse, but we never rebuilt normal. Ava had nightmares every night. Lauren stopped baking. I slept on the couch for almost a year, just to stay close to Ava's room, in case she screamed. Then came the HOA letters. First, about the temporary ramp. Then about the unsightly mailbox replacement. Then the yard clutter, meaning Ava's wheelchair, which she sometimes parked near the porch. I ignored them at first, thought it was bureaucracy, someone just doing their job. But then she showed up. Karen Weller, HOA president, mid-50s. Always in pastel cardigans, always clutching her phone like a badge. Her voice was sugary sweet but laced with venom, the kind of person who smiles when she's about to hurt you. She came by one morning while Ava was in therapy. "Chief Harrison," she said, "your property's starting to bring down the neighborhood value." I remember just staring at her thinking, what value? She glanced at the ramp, her nose wrinkling like it was garbage. "You could have chosen something more tasteful, maybe wood, not metal." That was when I realized she didn't see Ava's struggle. She saw inconvenience. I didn't respond. I just turned, walked inside, and closed the door. But inside, something started to shift. A quiet anger, the kind that doesn't shout, it smolders. Back then, I thought that was the worst she could do. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. The first letter came in a plain white envelope, tucked neatly under our doormat. Notice of noncompliance. Karen's handwriting was almost too perfect. Loops like a schoolteacher's. Every word sharp enough to cut. "The ramp on your property violates Section 4B of the Neighborhood Aesthetic Standards. Please remove or replace within 14 days. I remember staring at that paper while Ava practiced wheeling herself across the living room. Her arms shook from the effort, her hands still covered in soft white bandages. She looked up at me, her little voice breaking through the silence. "Daddy? Can I go outside today?" I forced a smile. "Maybe tomorrow, kiddo." Because how could I tell her that her ramp, her freedom, was now considered ugly? 2 days later, I saw Karen again. She was taking photos of my yard, of the ramp, of Ava's medical equipment drying on the porch. She didn't even try to hide it. Just stood there, phone in hand, lips pursed. I stepped outside, still in my firehouse t-shirt. "Can I help you, Karen?" She smiled like she'd been waiting for that. "Oh, Chief Harrison, I'm just documenting a few things for the board. You understand, we all have to follow the rules." I wanted to believe it was harmless bureaucratic nonsense. But then she added, "It's just, that ramp doesn't exactly fit the look of our community, you know. We have standards. Standards like the ones that decide who belongs and who doesn't." That night, I sat in Ava's room as she slept. Her small hand rested on the stuffed Dalmatian I'd given her from the firehouse. The moonlight caught the scar tissue on her cheek, thin, pink lines that told a story she'd never asked to live through. And I thought, if they knew what she's survived, they'd never dare judge her. But I was wrong again. 2 weeks later, Karen escalated. She called a community meeting, one of those potluck-style events at the clubhouse where everyone pretends to care about neighborhood unity. Lauren didn't want me to go, but I had to. I couldn't keep letting her throw jabs without standing up for my family. When I walked in, conversation died. Eyes followed me. Karen stood at the front, floral dress, clipboard in hand, voice dripping with authority. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Tonight, we'll be addressing ongoing compliance issues affecting our community's image and property values." She said image like it was holy. Then she clicked her remote. A photo of my house flashed onto the screen, zoomed in on the ramp. Gasps, murmurs. She didn't even flinch. "This," she said, "is an example of a violation that has yet to be corrected. We've received complaints." My throat tightened. "That ramp," I said quietly, "is for my daughter. She's recovering from burns. She can't walk without it." A few people shifted uncomfortably. But Karen, she smiled. "And we respect that, Chief. But rules are rules. If we start making exceptions, where do we stop? Today it's a ramp, tomorrow it's—" "Tomorrow," I cut in. "It's a child trapped in her home because people care more about symmetry than compassion." The room went silent. For a moment I thought maybe I'd gotten through to them. Then Karen looked at me with that same cold, polite smile. "I'm sorry you feel that way." That phrase, those 5 words, they're the gasoline of passive cruelty. After that meeting, it got worse. We'd wake up to find our trash cans overturned. HOA fines arrived weekly for improper storage, for visible medical equipment, for failure to maintain lawn uniformity. Someone even left a fake "for sale" sign in our yard. Ava noticed the whispers. The kids at the bus stop stared. Some of the adults did too, avoiding eye contact, pretending not to notice her scars. One afternoon, I caught Karen talking to another neighbor by the fence. She was laughing, and when I got closer, I heard it. She looks like one of those marshmallows that got too close to the campfire. They both laughed. I froze. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mind went white, just static. I wanted to scream to make them see what they were doing, but instead I turned away, because Ava was in the yard, watching me, and she didn't need to see her dad lose control. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of fines and complaint letters. Lauren placed her hand over mine. "You can't fight fire with fire," she whispered. Funny thing to say to a fire chief. But I knew she was right, for now I filed a formal complaint with the City Accessibility Board. They promised to look into it. Weeks passed. Nothing happened. Karen kept pushing. Then came the day that changed everything. It was the annual neighborhood barbecue, the one hosted by the HOA. Lauren wanted to skip it, but Ava insisted. "I want to show everyone I can walk again," she said, proudly balancing on her crutches. So we went. At first, it was fine. Kids ran through sprinklers, someone grilled burgers, and for a brief moment I thought maybe the nightmare was easing. Then Karen saw Ava. She walked right up to her, smiling of course, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, look who's back. How's my favorite little firecracker?" A few people chuckled, not realizing what she meant. But I saw the flicker in Karen's eyes. The cruelty wasn't accidental. Ava froze. Her lower lip trembled. She turned to me, confused, hurt. That was the moment something in me snapped. Quietly, decisively. I realized this wasn't just about a ramp anymore. This was about dignity, about my daughter's right to exist without shame. And Karen Weller was about to learn exactly who she was mocking. I didn't say anything that day at the barbecue, not to Karen, not to anyone. But inside, I was burning. Lauren knew it. She could always read me, the clenched jaw, the way I rubbed my wrist when I was holding back. "Don't let her get to you," she whispered as we packed up Ava's things. "She's not worth it." But Karen made it personal. And when you make it personal for a firefighter, someone who spent half his life pulling families from ashes, you'd better be ready for the heat that follows. The next few weeks were hell. Karen doubled down. She started sending official HOA notices with photos of Ava. The captions read things like "resident non-compliance" and "unsanctioned modification visible from street." I called the city attorney's office. They told me to keep documentation. Documentation. Meanwhile, my daughter couldn't go outside without being stared at. The ramp that had once given her freedom now felt like a stage where cruelty played out daily. One morning, I found a note taped to our mailbox. "If you want sympathy, move somewhere else. This isn't a charity neighborhood." Ava found it before I did. She didn't cry. She just asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I had no answer that wouldn't shatter her trust in people. Then came the inspection. Karen showed up with 2 HOA board members and a clipboard thicker than a case file. "Routine compliance check," she said sweetly. Lauren tried to shut the door, but Karen stepped forward. "It's mandatory. You agreed to this when you bought the property." I was at the station that morning, reviewing a training report when Lauren called. Her voice was shaking. "She took pictures of Ava's room, Michael. Her room." She said the medical equipment violated storage guidelines. That was it. I left the station without clocking out. By the time I got home, Karen was in the driveway, still snapping photos. I stepped between her and the ramp. "Delete those pictures, now." She blinked, feigning innocence. "I'm just doing my duty. You're harassing my family. Oh, please, don't be dramatic. If your daughter needs so much special care, maybe this neighborhood isn't." I didn't let her finish. "You finish that sentence and I'll have you escorted off this property." Her smile didn't waver. "You wouldn't dare. I'll have you removed from the HOA. I took a step closer. "Karen, I am the fire chief of this county? You think a homeowners association scares me?" For the first time, I saw it. The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, just a second of silence. But she recovered quickly. "We'll see what the board says." She turned, heels clicking down the pavement like punctuation marks. That night, I wrote everything down. Every notice, every conversation, every date and time. I started a file labeled Karen Incident Report. It wasn't for revenge, it was for protection. But as the pages filled, so did my anger. I found myself replaying her words while I tried to sleep. The laughter, the mockery, the complete lack of humanity. Then, something unexpected happened. Ava's ramp, the aluminum one we'd installed with city approval, was gone. I came home from a night shift, and it was missing. Just 2 bolts left in the concrete. Ava stood at the window crying. "Daddy, they took it." Lauren was on the phone with the police. "No, we don't know who did it," she said. "Yes, it's a safety violation. No, we don't have security footage." The responding officer was polite but useless. "You'd need proof," he said, handing me a card. "File a civil complaint if you think it's HOA related. Proof. Always proof." That night, I sat in the driveway with my old station body cam. I mounted it under the eaves, facing the street. I'd have my proof soon enough. 2 nights later, the footage came through. Karen. Flashlight in one hand, gloves on 2 men from the HOA board helping her. They unscrewed the bolts quietly, loading the ramp into a truck. I didn't sleep after that. I just stared at the screen, fists clenched, pulse pounding in my ears. In the morning, I printed still frames and delivered them to the sheriff's office. They promised to open an investigation. By that afternoon, Karen filed another complaint, this time for unauthorized recording of HOA personnel. It was surreal, like being trapped in a nightmare where reason no longer existed. Lauren broke down that night. "We should move," she said softly. "We can't keep doing this, Michael. Ava needs peace." I wanted to agree. I really did. But something inside me refused. If we moved, Karen would win. And every other person like her would think cruelty was consequence-free. A week later, the turning point came. Not with fire, but with smoke. It was a windy Saturday, the kind of day when the air smells like dust and dry leaves. Ava and I were working in the garage. She was painting again, finally smiling. Then the smell hit me. Sharp, acrid, wrong. "Stay here," I said, grabbing my radio instinctively. When I stepped outside, my heart dropped. Karen's backyard shed, 2 houses down, was on fire. Flames licking up the siding, black smoke rolling toward the sky. Neighbors screamed. Someone shouted, "Call 911." But I was already running. I didn't have gear, just instinct. I grabbed a hose, sprinted toward the fence, and vaulted it like I was 20 years younger. "Karen!" I yelled. "Is anyone inside?" She stumbled out of the patio door, coughing, mascara streaked. The propane tank." "Get back," I ordered. The tank was already hissing. I turned the hose full blast, trying to keep the flames at bay until the engine arrived. My crew pulled up minutes later, sirens slicing the air. We got the fire under control fast. No casualties. Minimal damage. When it was over, Karen stood on her lawn, trembling. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. I approached quietly. "You okay?" She nodded, voice barely a whisper. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to say something cruel. something to make her feel what she'd made us feel. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "That's why we're here," and walked away. The next morning, I found another letter taped to my door. Per HOA decision, unauthorized construction, ramp removal, was justified under Section 4B. Please refrain from further action until board review. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. No humanity. But something in the neighborhood had shifted. People who used to ignore us started talking. One neighbor, Daniel from across the street, stopped me as I got the mail. "I saw the video," he whispered. "That was messed up, man. If you ever need statements, I'll back you up." Others followed. One by one, people started seeing the truth. Then, a local reporter called. "We got a tip about an HOA targeting a disabled child. Would you be willing to go on record?" Lauren hesitated, but Ava, sitting nearby, looked up and said, "Maybe, if people know, they'll stop being mean." So we did. 2 days later, the story aired. Fire chief's daughter targeted by HOA after surviving blaze. The footage rolled. Karen caught on camera, the ramp missing, Ava's drawings on the wall. The clip went viral overnight. Karen's smug smile vanished from every meeting after that. The HOA board held an emergency session. She tried to paint herself as the victim, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she feared code violations might cause injury. But the court of public opinion had already decided. Petitions circulated. News vans parked at the entrance of Maple Ridge. For the first time in months, I saw Karen speechless. Still, I wasn't satisfied, because while her reputation burned, my daughter still had nightmares, still avoided mirrors, still asked me why people hated her for surviving. That's when I realized this wasn't about punishing Karen anymore. It was about making sure no one else went through what we did. So I took all my documentation, every letter, photo, report, and filed a formal complaint with the State Housing Authority. Then I filed another directly with the ADA Compliance Office. The response was immediate. The state launched an investigation into the Maple Ridge HOA for discrimination and violation of accessibility rights. Subpoenas were issued. Karen was removed as a president pending review. When the notice came in the mail, Lauren read it aloud, her voice shaking. They found probable cause. Ava clapped her hands, smiling for the first time in months. "Does that mean we won, Daddy?" I knelt beside her. "Not yet, sweetheart, but we're getting close." That night, as the house fell quiet, I stood by the window, looking out at the rebuilt ramp, silver under the porch light. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty, but it stood. And for the first time since the fire, I felt like we could finally breathe again. But the fight wasn't over yet, because Karen wasn't the kind of person to go quietly. And the real reckoning, the one that would test everything I believed in, was still to come. The day the hearing notice arrived, I was back at the station polishing the truck's chrome. The radio hummed with static when Lauren called. Her voice was flat. Tired. "She's suing us." I stopped mid-polish. "What?" "The HOA, Karen. She's filing a defamation suit. Says your video caused emotional distress and reputational harm." For a second, all I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent lights. After everything she'd done, she had the audacity to call herself the victim. I went home early. The driveway was empty except for Ava's wheelchair parked by the porch, the one she didn't need as often. Now she was inside, painting the ramp. Each panel had a bright, messy splash of color: yellows, blues, oranges, fire, and sunlight. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Making it pretty, so she can't say it's ugly anymore." I swallowed hard. "You did perfect, kiddo." But inside, I was trembling. The lawsuit hit like a second fire. Local media picked it up again. HOA president countersues fire chief. Public opinion flared, split down the middle. Some called her a monster. Others said I'd gone too far. My department got complaints. Conflict of interest. Abuse of authority. Words that cut deeper than any insult. One morning, my captain pulled me aside. "Mike, you're a damn good chief, but this thing's getting political. Maybe take some leave till it blows over." So I did unpaid. Suddenly, my world, the one place I'd always felt strong, felt like it was turning against me. Lauren tried to stay calm, but I saw it in her eyes, the exhaustion, the fear that this fight would never end. Then came the night I almost lost it. It was 2 weeks before the court date. Ava had just gone to bed when I heard something outside or a dull thunk against the garage door. I grabbed a flashlight, heart racing. When I stepped outside, the smell hit me first. Acrid, sharp, something burning. On the lawn, a pile of our mail was smoldering, half-burned envelopes scattered across the grass. And right on top was another note. "Burn for burn." I froze. The handwriting was familiar. Those same perfect loops, that same smug precision, Karen. I looked up the street. Her house sat in darkness, blinds drawn. But I knew she was watching. I wanted to storm over there, to demand she look me in the eye, but Ava's face flashed in my mind. The fear, the tremor in her hands when she smelled smoke. So instead, I called the police. Again. They took photos, nodded sympathetically, and said the same thing they always did. Without direct evidence, there's not much we can do. No evidence, no accountability, no justice. That night, I sat awake in Ava's room. She was dreaming, murmuring softly, something about rainbows and fire trucks. Her little hand clutched the stuffed Dalmatian I'd given her after the fire, and as I watched her sleep, something inside me broke. Not the kind of break that makes you rage, the kind that hollows you out. I dedicated my life to saving people, to pulling them out of burning houses, to calming chaos. But I couldn't save my own family from a woman with a clipboard and a cruel heart. I felt powerless, and I hated it. The court hearing was held downtown in a small wood-paneled courtroom that smelled faintly of polish and old carpet. Karen was there with her lawyer, pristine as ever, wearing pearls and a smirk. The cameras were waiting outside. I didn't bring reporters or crew. Just my truth, and a flash drive with every photo, every document, every time-stamped video I'd collected. When it was my turn to speak, I stood slowly. My uniform jacket hung heavy on my shoulders. "Your Honor," I began, "I've spent 22 years running toward fires. But the one that burned my family didn't start with a match. It started with cruelty." Karen's lawyer objected to emotional language. The judge allowed it. I played the footage. Karen, caught in the act, unscrewing the ramp, the timestamps, the complaint letters, the photos of Ava's burns. The courtroom was silent. Karen looked straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes cold. Then Lauren spoke. Her voice trembled, but every word landed like a hammer. She mocked our daughter's scars, called her names, and when we built a ramp so she could go outside again, Karen called it ugly. Ava sat quietly beside us, holding my hand. She wore a little yellow dress with sunflowers, her favorite. When the video ended, the judge leaned back, rubbing his chin. "Mrs. Weller," he said slowly, "you have the right to enforce community standards. You do not have the right to violate federal law or human decency." He dismissed her case on the spot, and then, in an unexpected move, he referred the entire HOA to the county attorney for civil rights investigation. Karen's mouth fell open. Her lawyer whispered something urgently, but it was too late. The gavel came down like thunder. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Ava held my hand tighter. "Did we win?" she asked. I looked down at her, that same brave little girl who'd survived what most grown men couldn't. "We did, sweetheart," I said softly. "But winning doesn't mean it stops hurting." She nodded, like she understood. Kids always understand more than we think. When we got home, the neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. Karen's house was dark again, the blinds still drawn. Word spread fast. The HOA board had been dissolved, and a new one would be elected. Neighbors who once avoided us started waving again. Some brought food, flowers, even gift cards. Sympathy wrapped in small gestures. But none of it fixed what she'd done. Ava still flinched at loud noises. Lauren still checked the locks twice every night, and I still woke up sweating from dreams where the fire never ended. One evening, a week later, I saw Karen standing by her mailbox. Alone, I almost drove past. But something, maybe anger, maybe closure, made me stop. She looked up as I got out of the truck. Her face was pale, makeup gone, eyes red. "Karen," I said quietly. She didn't answer. For a moment, I thought about everything: the ramp, the laughter, the lawsuits, the way she'd made my daughter afraid to exist. And then I saw something unexpected in her eyes. Fear. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said finally. "I just wanted order. I didn't think—" "No," I interrupted. "You didn't think. You just judged." She looked down. "I lost everything, you know. My job, my friends." I nodded. "You lost them because you burned bridges you didn't have to light." We stood there for a long moment, the sound of sprinklers hissing in the distance. Then I turned to leave. As I opened my truck door, she said softly, "How do you live with it? The fire. The memories." I paused, staring at the horizon where the sun was dipping low, the sky painted in gold and orange, like Ava's artwork. "You don't live with it," I said. "You live through it." Then I got in the truck and drove home. That night, I tucked Ava into bed. She was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. The ramp outside her window glowed under the porch light now covered in her hand-painted suns. Lauren leaned against the doorway, eyes soft. "You think it's finally over?" I looked at our daughter, then out at the ramp, strong, bright, unmovable. "Not over," I said quietly. "But maybe it's healing." Outside, a faint drizzle began to fall, the kind that smells like earth and hope. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't smell smoke, just rain. The weeks after the court ruling felt strangely calm, like the silence that hangs over a neighborhood after a storm. The fences still stood, the lawns still gleamed, but everything felt different. People avoided eye contact with Karen's house. No one mowed near her yard anymore. She'd become a ghost in her own kingdom. For the first time in a year, I could breathe. I didn't realize how much of my life had been spent waiting for the next confrontation until it was gone. The city inspector came by one morning to certify our new ramp. Same structure, now officially approved under the ADA's protection order. He handed me the document with a small smile. "Permanent permit," he said. "They can't touch it again." I signed it and taped it to the inside of the window like a trophy. When Ava came home from therapy that day, she saw it and beamed. "Does that mean we're safe now?" she asked. "Yeah, kiddo," I said, "we're safe." But even as I said it, I knew safety wasn't about paperwork. It was about peace, and peace takes time. 2 months later, I got a call from a local journalist, the same one who'd broken the story originally. "Chief Harrison," she said, "the county attorney's office finalized their findings. The HOA's actions violated both the Fair Housing Act and ADA accessibility laws. They're recommending penalties and mandatory inclusion training for all board members." I just sat there, listening. Not because I needed the validation, but because it meant the system finally saw what we'd lived through. It meant this wasn't just our fight anymore. When I told Lauren, she hugged me, tight, like she hadn't in months. "We did it," she whispered. "You made them see." but I shook my head. We did it. Ava did it. By surviving. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through messages. Hundreds of them, people from all over the country. Parents, firefighters, veterans, nurses, all saying the same thing. This happened to us too. Thank you for standing up. You gave us courage. It was overwhelming. For the first time since the fire, I felt something bigger than anger. Purpose. Karen sold her house a few weeks later. A moving truck pulled up early in the morning, and by noon, she was gone. No goodbye. No note. Just absence. Lauren watched from the window, quiet. "Do you feel sorry for her?" she asked. I thought about it for a long time. The version of me 6 months ago would have said no without hesitation. But now, maybe a little, I said finally. Not because she deserved pity, but because people like her. They burn their lives down without ever realizing it. Lauren nodded. Fire doesn't always start with flames. She was right. The new HOA board reached out soon after, a different tone entirely. The new president, a retired teacher named Rosa, came to our house personally. She was nervous, fidgeting with her pen as she spoke. "Chief Harrison, on behalf of the community, I want to apologize. For everything. What you went through, what your daughter went through, it's unacceptable." I could tell she meant it. Rosa handed me a folder. Inside was a proposal, a community resilience program. Workshops on empathy, accessibility, and neighborhood inclusion. They wanted me to lead the first session. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a public speaker. I dealt with fires, not feelings. But Lauren smiled. "You've been leading your whole life," she said, "just in a different uniform." So, I said yes. The first session was packed. Neighbors, city officials, even a few reporters Ava insisted on coming. She brought her painting supplies, of course. I stood in front of them, not as a fire chief this time, but as a father. I told them about the night of the fire, about the sound of wood cracking, about the silence afterward, about how the real damage didn't come from flames. It came from what people said once the smoke cleared. I watched their faces shift. Guilt, empathy, realization. Then Ava wheeled herself forward and lifted her painting, a bright orange sun surrounded by blues and greens. She said, "This is our house. It used to be gray, but now it's warm again." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. When the applause ended, Rosa came up to her and said softly, "That's the most beautiful house I've ever seen." After that day, everything began to heal in slow, invisible ways. The same neighbors who once whispered started greeting Ava by name. The mailbox that had been vandalized was replaced by volunteers. Someone even planted sunflowers along the sidewalk, her favorite. One evening, I found a note tucked under our doormat. No envelope this time, just a single line. "Thank you for reminding us what community is supposed to mean." No signature. But somehow, I knew it wasn't Karen. It was everyone else I returned to work 3 months later. The station welcomed me back with a small banner and a cake that said, "Welcome home, Chief." That night, we got a call. Small kitchen fire, no casualties routine. But as I stood there, watching the flames flicker before they died, I felt something different. Not fear, not anger, respect. Fire isn't evil, it's indifferent. It consumes whatever it's given. And people are the same. Give them hate, they'll burn everything down. Give them compassion, they'll light the way Ava started walking without crutches the next spring. The physical therapist called it miraculous, but I knew better. It wasn't a miracle, it was willpower, pure and stubborn, just like her mom's. We celebrated with a picnic in the yard. She walked up the ramp one last time, stood at the top, and raised her arms like she'd conquered Everest. "Look, Daddy, I'm taller than the fire now." Lauren laughed, crying at the same time. And me, I just watched, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. The kind that doesn't roar, it hums, quietly, steady, like rain on a tin roof. Later that night, I stood by the window again, same spot where I'd once watched Karen with her clipboard. The porch light glowed softly on the ramp. Ava's painted suns had faded slightly, but they still shone. I thought about everything, the fire, the loss, the fight, the justice, and I realized every flame leaves something behind, not just ashes, but change. Because fire doesn't just destroy, it reveals. It shows you what's strong enough to survive, and we had survived. The next morning, I found Ava sitting by the ramp, drawing again. She handed me a sketch, a simple one. Our house, the ramp, 3 stick figures, and a giant sun above them at the bottom she'd written in uneven letters, "We don't burn anymore." I felt my throat tighten. I kissed the top of her head. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, "we shine." A year has passed since the fire that wasn't a fire. The one that burned invisible, through words and whispers, through rules and cruelty. When I look back now, it doesn't feel like rage anymore. It feels like distance, like watching old footage from someone else's life. The pain's still there, but softer, like an old scar that no longer stings when you touch it. Maple Ridge looks different now. Not because the house has changed, but because the people did. The new HOA board, the one Rosa leads, turned the clubhouse into a community space. They built ramps, installed benches, even started a fund for residents with medical needs. Every summer, they hold what they now call the Sunrise Fair. It's named after Ava's paintings, bright suns that hang on banners around the park. This year, she opened the fair herself, walked the whole path without help, smiling at everyone. When the crowd clapped, she didn't hide her scars. She raised her arms high like light breaking through smoke, and for the first time since that awful night, I didn't see the fire. When I looked at her, I saw the sunrise. Sometimes, I still get asked by people, reporters, community leaders, even other firefighters, like how I stayed calm. "How did you not lose it?" they ask. After everything she did, how did you not go after her? And I tell them the truth. I did lose it, just not in the way they think. There were nights I wanted to scream, to fight, to make someone pay. But fire teaches you one thing better than any sermon or law book. Once it starts, you can't control what it takes. I've seen what vengeance does. It burns too hot, consumes too much. So instead, I chose to contain it, to build something from the ashes. Lauren likes to say that we didn't just survive the fire, we rebuilt with better materials, stronger, kinder, fireproof. After the investigation closed, I was invited to speak at the State Safety Conference. Not about firefighting, about community empathy. Standing on that stage in my dress blues, I realized how strange it was. Me, a fire chief, talking about kindness instead of suppression systems. But I told them our story, all of it. And I said, the worst fire I ever fought wasn't made of flames. It was made of apathy. You could hear a pin drop. Then I saw a man in the front row wipe his eyes. Later, he told me his son was in a wheelchair, and their HOA had given them grief too. He said he was going home to change that. That's when I knew this story wasn't just ours anymore. It was everyone's. Karen never came back. Last I heard, she moved to another county, maybe even another state. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about what she did, about the girl she mocked, the family she tried to break. I don't wish her pain. I wish her understanding, because understanding is the only thing stronger than fire, and maybe, someday, she'll find it. Ava's growing fast now. She's 10, but her spirit feels older, tempered, like steel forged in heat. She still paints suns, hundreds of them, They're all over the house, on the fridge, in frames, taped to my office door at the station. She says the suns are so nobody forgets to look for the light. Some nights when I come home late, I find her drawings scattered on the floor, glowing in the lamp's soft light, and every time I remember the girl I carried out of the flames, broken, terrified, silent. Now she laughs, she paints, she lives. That's more than enough for me. Lauren and I have started volunteering together, working with other families who've faced housing discrimination. We share our story. We help them file cases, connect them to resources. It's not glamorous work, but it's good work, honest. One night after a workshop, a young mother came up to me in tears. She said, "You don't know me, but your story kept me from giving up my daughter walks because yours did first." I had no words, just tears. I realized then that pain, when shared, becomes purpose. And purpose, that's how you heal. Sometimes I still visit the site of the old firehouse blaze, the one that started everything. The foundation's gone, but if you stand there at sunset, you can still smell faint traces of smoke in the dirt. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and whisper, "We made it." And the wind always answers back. Maybe that's God. Maybe it's just memory. Either way, it feels like peace. Now, every morning before work, I sit on the porch with my coffee and watch the sun rise over Maple Ridge. The ramp gleams in the light. Ava's painted suns shimmer faintly in the dew. Neighbors wave as they head out. Some stop to chat. No one complains about aesthetics anymore. Because now, the neighborhood's beauty isn't measured in symmetry. It's measured in kindness. The kind you earn. The kind you fight for. The kind that costs you something to learn. When people ask me what justice means, I tell them this. Justice isn't revenge. It's rebuilding what cruelty tried to destroy without becoming cruel yourself. Justice is watching your child walk again, not just on her legs, but with pride. Justice is a ramp standing strong, covered in the brushstrokes of hope. Justice is light where there was smoke. I used to think the sound of fire trucks was the sound of danger. Now, to me, it's the sound of second chances. Every alarm means someone still has time. Someone still has hope. That's the thing about fire. It shows you what matters most before it's gone. And for us, it showed us something worth keeping. Not the house, not the ramp, but the strength to stand back up and keep shining. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar like fire. It glows quietly, like the sunrise after the smoke.